So when we look at a river, it's easy to think of them as sort of this fixed thing that's just carrying water from upstream to downstream. But if we look at it over a span of years and even decades, these rivers are moving, and they can move gradually over time through this process of erosion or deposition as the river deposits sediment. More than 3 billion people around the world live along river systems and directly rely upon them for food, water, energy, and transport. We need to understand how these rivers will naturally move over time and how can we modify them in a way that does not set us up for future disasters and for a reduction in the resources they provide. My name is Austin Chadwick, and I study river systems, their origins, evolution, and how they respond to our rapidly changing world. Rivers are really diverse in the many shapes and sizes they make, but what we see is that rivers come in two main categories. The first is a single thread river. This is when all of the flow is confined to a single channel and it migrates gradually as it erodes one bank and deposits another bank, causing the whole shape of that channel to move. The other type of river is these braided rivers, or multi-channel rivers we call them, that naturally divide their flow, and that can interconnect and intermingle and slide into each other, merge and split. So past work has really built this large body of knowledge about different types of river systems and how they work, but we're still in the very beginning stages of understanding what are the physical processes that are operating to cause rivers to form in different patterns. So, for example, we tend to track the river's center lines and how does that line move over time. But when we get to questions of multi-thread river, it suddenly becomes tricky to define what is the river's center line and what does it mean when that center line moves. Where I come in is to look deeper at this satellite archives and analyze all rivers in the same kind of framework and see what can we do to better understand how these rivers form. When I was working in Vamsi Ganti's group at the University of California, Santa Barbara, we wanted to know what is the physical mechanism that causes one river to decide whether it's going to flow as a single channel or divide into these multiple interconnected channels. So doing a lot of work in the lab, I became familiar with this technique, particle image velocimetry, originally developed to study how particles move when they're seeded into a fluid. So we're not seeding the rivers with particles here. What we're doing is we adapted these image processing algorithms to track river channels in a landscape. It doesn't matter if it's a single channel or a multi-thread river. We can apply this to the wealth of satellite imagery from around the world. So looking at a single river, first we'll take out images from that river. We'll figure out where's the river, where is its banks. We would then use our algorithm, which measured erosion and accretion on each bank over a span of years and even decades, and then we'll add that up and do our statistics to figure out what is the average erosion and accretion along the length of that river, and then we compared it from one river to the next. We looked at 36 years of imagery from 84 river systems around the world, all of Earth's large rivers, which totaled out to more than 11 million measurements of riverbank erosion and accretion. So when we looked at the data, we saw that for the single thread or meandering rivers, there was this balance. So as the river migrates, it eroded on average the same amount that it accreted. So this allowed the river to basically migrate over time, keeping a constant shape that can basically build out and make the channel very sinuous and eventually intersect and create oxbow lakes. In contrast, when we looked at these multi-thread rivers, we saw that there was actually an imbalance. They actually grew wider over time, so they would erode one bank faster than they could deposit on the opposite bank, causing the river to widen and widen until eventually it split. And then they'll go through these cycles of thread is born, and then it moves, widens, and splits, and that's why they're multi-threaded, is because the rivers cannot maintain a constant width. One of the really beautiful aspects of this finding is that there's limits to this chaos. Basically, the rivers can only get so much wider relative to their initial state, and that had direct consequences for how would you restore a river differently if it was single thread or multi-thread. And it turns out when you do the math, multi-thread rivers might not need as much space and as much time to naturally restore themselves as a single thread river, and that's really important when we're thinking about these multi-billion-dollar projects around the world trying to restore their natural flows and ecosystems. There's still so much that we want to do to better understand these systems. We know that we see this disequilibrium at the Earth's largest rivers and also at these controlled laboratory scale baby rivers. So the natural hypothesis would be that the same thing is going on across these scales. And so if we want to understand the majority of Earth's rivers, we need to use more high-resolution satellite data. Another big avenue of research is to look at this physical process that's causing the banks to erode faster. And for that, we need field work and experiments and modeling to really sort of fill in the gaps and better understand what's causing that erosion to occur. They're basically these conduits of fresh flowing water that carry nutrients, sediment for people and animals and ecosystems. So if we better understand rivers, we can learn how to better coexist and live with them.